It was 4:02 a.m., pitch black outside, and I was sitting at gate C-17 of the Colorado Springs airport. My duffel bag rested quietly by my feet, containing only the essentials, a few changes of clothes, my mother's dog-eared cookbook, and 11 years of bottled-up regret. My phone buzzed again, General Langston calling for the 6th time. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, casting everyone in the near-empty terminal in the same sickly pallor. An elderly couple dozed in chairs across from me. A business traveler typed furiously on his laptop. None of them knew they were witnessing the most significant act of rebellion in my military career. To them, I was just another traveler. But in 3 hours, I would become the most talked-about staff sergeant at Fort Falcon. Just a few hours earlier, General Langston had looked me square in the eyes and barked, "Staff Sergeant Brooks, you will prepare breakfast for 40 senior officers tomorrow morning at 0500 sharp. Understood?" I replied exactly as expected. Yes, sir. But something inside me had finally cracked. After 11 years of being the yes woman, the quiet workhorse behind every promotion banquet, early morning strategy session, surprise inspection, and morale breakfast, I was done. I stared at the departure board. Flight UA-14328 to Atlanta. On time. Boarding in 20 minutes. My sister Emma had no idea I was coming. I'd called her at midnight, my voice barely above a whisper. As I stood in the darkened kitchen of my small, off-base apartment, "I need to come home," was all I'd said. "I'll be waiting," was all she'd answered. The weight of what I was doing pressed down on me. 11 years of service. A spotless record. Commendations for exceptional dedication to duty. All of it about to be shattered because I couldn't make breakfast. But it wasn't about breakfast. It had never been about breakfast. My phone buzzed again. Not the general this time, but Captain Cole. I felt a pang of guilt. Cole had always been decent, at least compared to most. He'd noticed when I worked double shifts. He'd acknowledged my contributions, even if in passing. But he was still part of a system that had slowly, methodically drained me dry. I thought about the 40 officers who would arrive at 500. I pictured their faces when they found the kitchen cold and dark. No coffee brewing. No smell of bacon frying. No Naomi Brooks, reliable to a fault, standing ready to serve them. For a moment, my resolve wavered. I imagined myself rushing back to base, making excuses about car trouble, working frantically to get everything ready. They'd be angry, but they'd forgive me. Good old Brooks always comes through in the end. But then I remembered Thanksgiving, 3 months ago. The base commander's wife had requested a traditional spread with creative touches. I'd worked 36 hours straight, preparing a feast for 60 people. Somewhere between brining the turkey and piping Duchess potatoes, I'd missed 3 calls from my sister. Our father had suffered a stroke. By the time I checked my phone, he was gone. I never got to say goodbye. When I asked for emergency leave after the dinner was over, of course. General Langston had frowned. "The memorial service is already over, isn't it? We have the Secretary of Defense visiting next week. I'll need you here." I'd nodded, dry-eyed, hollow. "Yes, sir." An announcement crackled over the airport speakers. United Airlines Flight 1428 to Atlanta is now boarding all military personnel and passengers with small children. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely light. I pulled my military ID from my wallet, looked at the photo of the woman with the tight smile and hopeful eyes, and slipped it into the side pocket of my duffel bag. For the first time in 11 years, I wouldn't be using it to board first. Instead, I pulled out my regular Georgia driver's license, expired but still valid for flying, and got in line with the other civilians. As I handed my boarding pass to the gate agent, my phone buzzed one final time. A text message from Specialist Rodriguez, my assistant in the kitchen. "Where are you?" "General is here. Everyone is waiting." I turned my phone off and boarded the plane. As we taxied down the runway, I thought about the officers arriving at the mess hall. I imagined General Langston's face turning from irritation to confusion to rage. I pictured Captain Cole checking the prep kitchen, the storage rooms, calling my phone again and again. For a moment, I felt something close to terror. What had I done? This wasn't just missing a shift at a diner. This was the United States Army. This was dereliction of duty. This was career suicide. But as the plane lifted off, banking east toward the rising sun, something else replaced the fear, a feeling so foreign I barely recognized it. Freedom. I leaned my head against the window and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I slept deeply, dreamlessly. And when I woke, I was halfway to Georgia, halfway to whatever came next. By the time I landed in Atlanta, my phone had died. I didn't charge it. I walked through the terminal feeling strangely disconnected, as if I were moving through someone else's life. The civilians around me talked and laughed, unburdened by rank or protocol. Children ran between gates. No one stood at attention. No one said sir or ma'am unless they meant it as a courtesy, not an obligation. Emma was waiting at arrivals, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes scanning the crowd. When she saw me, her face crumpled. She ran toward me and wrapped me in a hug so tight it hurt. "You stupid, stubborn soldier," she whispered against my ear. "It took you long enough." I held on to her, my anchor in a suddenly vast ocean of uncertainty. "Let's go home," I said, the words feeling strange and wonderful in my mouth. Home. Not barracks. Not duty station. Home. As we drove away from the airport through the sprawling suburbs of Atlanta, Emma didn't ask questions. She knew I'd talk when I was ready. Instead, she filled me in on her life. Her job teaching second grade, her recent breakup, the new puppy she'd adopted from the shelter. Normal life. Civilian life. I wondered if I remembered how to live it. The morning sun filtered through Emma's kitchen curtains, casting warm patterns across the worn wooden table. I sat there, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that I'd been allowed to pour myself, allowed to drink slowly, without rushing to my station. It had been 24 hours since I'd walked out of Fort Falcon. 24 hours of silence from my phone, which remained uncharged in my duffel bag. "So," Emma said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "Are you going to tell me what happened, or am I supposed to guess?" I took another sip of coffee. Where to begin? How to explain the slow erosion of a spirit, the gradual tightening of a noose made of duty and expectation? "I left," I said simply. "I walked out before a major officer's breakfast. Didn't tell anyone, just left." Emma's eyebrows shot up. "Wow, that doesn't sound like the Naomi Brooks I know. The one who color codes her sock drawer and pays her credit card bill 2 weeks early." I almost smiled. She wasn't wrong. I had always been the responsible one, the reliable one. Even as children, I was the one who made sure Emma had her lunch money, who reminded our father to sign permission slips, who kept our lives running on schedule after our mother died. "I think that's the problem," I said slowly. "I've been that Naomi Brooks for so long I forgot there might be another version waiting to get out." I told her then, everything. About the years of being the go-to, the reliable one, the one who never said no. About being passed over for rotations and promotions because I was too valuable where I was. About watching male colleagues with half my skill advance while I remained stuck. Making the same meals for the same officers who barely acknowledged my existence. I told her about Captain Cole's backhanded compliment. Hands of a soldier, soul of a housewife, and the way the other cooks had laughed. I told her about missing our father's final moments because I was making Dutchess potatoes for people who couldn't tell them from instant mashed. And finally, I told her about the list. 40 names. 5 hours notice, no team. No consideration. So I said, "Yes, sir," like always, I concluded. And then I came here. Emma was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. I blinked, surprised. Proud? Emma, I basically deserted. I'll probably be dishonorably discharged. Everything I've worked for what? She interrupted. To be taken advantage of? To be invisible except when they need something from you? That's not a career, Naomi, that's servitude. Her words hit me with unexpected force. Had I really been serving, or had I been serving myself up piece by piece until there was almost nothing left? What will you do now? Emma asked. I shook my head. I don't know. I haven't thought that far ahead. It was true. In my rush to escape, I hadn't considered the aftermath. Would they send MPs to find me? Would I be court-martialed? Would I ever be able to serve again? Did I even want to? Well, Emma said, rising from the table, you don't have to figure it out today. Or tomorrow. Stay as long as you need. She rinsed her mug in the sink, then turned to face me. But at some point, you should probably charge your phone. I nodded, but made no move to do so. Not yet. For now, I wanted to exist in this pocket of silence. this space between what was and what would be. After breakfast, I helped Emma clean up, then took a long shower, letting the hot water wash away the last traces of military life. I changed into civilian clothes, jeans, and a soft sweater that Emma lent me and spent the rest of the morning on her small back porch, watching the neighborhood go about its day. Children walked to school, their backpacks bouncing. Mail carriers delivered packages. Dogs barked at squirrels. Life, happening all around me, without orders or protocol. Around noon, Emma's puppy, a scrappy terrier mix named Bandit, jumped onto my lap and settled there, his warm weight anchoring me to the present moment. "He likes you," Emma said, appearing in the doorway. "He's usually shy with strangers." "Maybe he knows I'm not a stranger," I replied, scratching behind Bandit's ears. "Maybe he knows I'm family," Emma smiled. "Speaking of family, I called Aunt Celia, told her you were visiting." "She wants us for dinner tonight," I tensed. Aunt Celia, our mother's sister, had never approved of my military career. "The women in our family aren't soldiers," she'd said when I enlisted. "We don't take orders from men in uniforms." "Did you tell her?" I began. "That you're AWOL?" "No, that's your story to tell, or not." Emma sat down beside me, taking Bandit from my lap. "But she'd understand better than you think. Remember, she walked out on her nursing job after 30 years when that new administrator tried to double her patient load. I did remember. Aunt Celia, 62 and formidable, telling her boss exactly where he could stick his new efficiency protocols. She'd found a better position within a week, but I wasn't Aunt Celia, and the army wasn't a hospital. "I'll go," I said eventually. "But I'm not ready to explain everything." "You don't have to," Emma assured me. "Just be there. Eat her food. Let her fuss over how thin you are. It's what she needs. What about what I need?" I wanted to ask. But wasn't that the problem? After so long putting others first, I barely knew what my own needs were anymore. As the afternoon wore on, my thoughts kept circling back to Fort Falcon. What was happening there now? Had they found someone else to cook the officers' meals? Had they sent someone to my apartment looking for me? Were they worried or just angry? I thought of Specialist Rodriguez, left to handle the fallout of my disappearance. I felt a stab of guilt. Rodriguez was a good kid, eager to learn, respectful. He didn't deserve to be caught in the middle of my rebellion, but then I remembered how they'd worked him just as hard as me. How his request for leave to attend his brother's wedding had been denied because the mission comes first. How the light in his eyes had dimmed over the past year, the same way mine had. Maybe my absence would be a wake-up call for more than just me? By late afternoon, the silence from my uncharged phone had become oppressive rather than liberating. I knew I couldn't hide forever. Whatever consequences awaited me, I would have to face them eventually. I found my charger in my duffel bag and plugged in my phone. As it came to life, I braced myself for the barrage of messages, calls, and possibly threats that would surely flood in. But I wasn't prepared for the first notification that appeared on my screen. A text from Captain Cole, sent just 2 hours after my flight had taken off. "Brooks, whatever's going on, we can fix it. Just let me know you're safe. Not an order. Not a threat. Concern." And then, another message, sent that morning. "The general wants to court-martial you for desertion. I convinced him to wait 48 hours. Please contact me. I can help." I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Captain Cole was risking his own standing to defend me. Why would he do that? Before I could process this, more notifications appeared. 12 missed calls. 27 text messages. 15 voicemails and an email sent from General Langston's office with a subject line that made my blood run cold. Official notice of disciplinary action. Staff Sergeant Naomi Brooks. My finger hovered over it, trembling slightly. Once I opened it, there would be no going back. No more pretending I was just on vacation. No more sitting on Emma's porch, playing with her dog, acting like a normal civilian. I would have to be Staff Sergeant Brooks again, facing the consequences of her actions. I set the phone down without opening the email. Tomorrow. I would deal with it all tomorrow. Tonight, I would go to Aunt Celia's for dinner. I would eat her famous pot roast, drink her too-sweet iced tea, and let her fuss over me. For one more night, I would be just Naomi, Emma's sister. Celia's niece, not a soldier who had broken her oath. Not yet. Aunt Celia's house smelled like pot roast and cinnamon, a combination that instantly transported me back to Sunday dinners before my mother passed. The small brick ranch hadn't changed much in 20 years. Same floral curtains, same collection of ceramic birds on the mantel, same faded family photos covering the hallway wall. "Look who finally remembered she has family," Aunt Celia said when she opened the door, her tone sharp but her eyes soft. She pulled me into a hug that felt like forgiveness for sins I hadn't confessed. "Hi, Aunt Celia," I managed, breathing in her familiar scent of rose water and baking spices. She held me at arm's length, her keen eyes scanning me from head to toe. "You're too thin," she pronounced as Emma had predicted. "And your eyes, you look like you haven't slept in years." Maybe I haven't, I thought. Not really. The three of us settled around Aunt Celia's dining table, laden with enough food for twice our number. As we ate, they carefully steered the conversation away from my work, focusing instead on family news, neighborhood gossip, and Emma's classroom adventures. I was grateful for the reprieve, though I noticed Aunt Celia watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. She saw too much, always had. Halfway through dinner, her landline rang. She excused herself to answer it, and I heard her voice from the kitchen, suddenly sharp. "No, I will not put her on. Who do you think you are calling my home like this?" A pause. "I don't care what rank you hold, young man. In my house, the only general who matters is General Mills, and that's only because he makes my favorite cereal." My stomach dropped. I looked at Emma, who appeared equally alarmed. Aunt Celia returned to the dining room, her face flushed with indignation. "Some man calling himself Captain Cole," she announced. "Wanting to speak to you. I told him this isn't a military installation, and he can't just bark orders at civilians." "You told a captain in the United States Army to buzz off?" Emma asked, sounding both horrified and impressed. "I said no such thing," Aunt Celia sniffed. "I simply informed him that my niece is having dinner with her family and isn't taking calls from work. I told him to call back tomorrow." I stared at her, speechless. The casual dismissal of military authority was so foreign to me it might as well have been in another language. "How did he find me here?" I finally managed to ask. Aunt Celia shrugged. "Said they traced your phone." The nerve. As if you're some criminal. In the eyes of the military, I probably was. AWOL. Dereliction of duty. Possible desertion charges. The words echoed in my head, stark and damning. "I should call him back," I said weakly. "You will do no such thing," Aunt Celia declared, sitting back down and serving herself another helping of green beans. "Not until you've had dessert." I made peach cobbler. And just like that, the decision was made. Captain Cole, the United States Army, and my uncertain future would all have to wait until after peach cobbler. The surreal normalcy of the moment nearly undid me. Here I was, eating comfort food with family while my military career imploded. The contrast was so sharp it was almost painful. "He sounded worried," Aunt Celia added casually, "not angry. If that helps." It didn't really. Worry implied I'd done something to be worried about, which I had. It implied consequences, which there would be. After dessert, I helped with the dishes, my hands moving mechanically through the familiar motions of rinsing and drying. Aunt Celia hummed beside me, a gospel tune I recognized from childhood. "You know," she said, not looking at me, "your mother would be proud of you." I nearly dropped the plate I was drying. For what? Abandoning my post? Betraying my oath? Aunt Celia turned off the water and faced me directly. "For remembering that you're a person first and a soldier second. For knowing when enough is enough." Mom was all about duty and responsibility, I argued. She would have told me to stick it out. "Your mother," Aunt Celia said firmly, "knew the difference between duty and exploitation. She wouldn't have wanted her daughter used up and thrown away for someone else's convenience." I felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "I don't know what to do now," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Aunt Celia handed me another dish. "You'll figure it out. But whatever you decide, know that you have a home here." You always did. On the drive back to Emma's, I finally checked my email. The official notice was exactly what I'd expected, a formal summons to appear before my commanding officer within 48 hours to address serious violations of military protocol and possible dereliction of duty. "Well?" Emma asked as we pulled into her driveway. "I have to go back," I said. "Day after tomorrow at the latest," she nodded, unsurprised. "What will you say?" I gazed out the window at the darkened street, at houses where people lived ordinary lives unbound by chains of command. The truth, I guess. That I couldn't do it anymore. That I needed to breathe. And if they don't understand? Then I'll face the consequences. Emma reached over and squeezed my hand. Whatever happens, you did the right thing. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is say no when everyone expects you to say yes. Back at her house, I finally returned Captain Cole's call. He answered on the first ring as if he'd been waiting by the phone. "Brooks," he said, relief evident in his voice. "Where are you?" "With family," I replied, not giving specifics even though he probably already knew. "I got the summons." "It could have been worse," he said quietly. "Langston wanted to send MPs to bring you in. I convinced him you weren't a flight risk." "Why would you do that?" I asked, genuinely confused. Captain Cole and I had a professional relationship, nothing more. He had no reason to stick his neck out for me. There was a pause. "Because what happened to you is happening all over the base. Good soldiers being worked to the bone because they're too valuable to promote or reassign." "It isn't right," his words stunned me. I had thought my struggle was mine alone. "I have to face the music," I said finally. "Yes," he agreed. "But you don't have to face it alone. 0900 day after tomorrow, my office. We'll go in together." After we hung up, I sat on Emma's guest bed for a long time, my mind racing. Captain Cole's support was unexpected, a life raft in turbulent waters. But would it be enough? Could anything be enough to salvage what I'd done? As I finally lay down to sleep, a new thought surfaced. Maybe I didn't want to salvage my military career. Maybe this was the universe giving me the push I needed to find a new path. For the first time in years, possibility unfurled before me like a map to unknown territories. Frightening, yes, but also exhilarating. I slept deeply that night, dreaming of kitchens where I cooked only what I wanted, when I wanted, for people who saw me as more than just a pair of capable hands. The drive back to Fort Falcon was silent. Emma had insisted on accompanying me, saying she didn't trust the military not to railroad me. We'd left at dawn, stopping only for gas and coffee, arriving at the base perimeter just before 8:30 a.m. "You don't have to come in," I told her as we approached the main gate. "Like hell I don't," she replied, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "I'm not letting you face this alone." At the security checkpoint, I presented my ID to the guard, a young private I didn't recognize. He examined it carefully, then made a call. After a brief conversation, he returned my ID and waved us through. "Staff Sergeant Brooks," he said. "Captain Cole is expecting you at his office, Building 237. No handcuffs. No armed escort. Just a standard entry procedure." I wasn't sure if that was a good sign or if the real confrontation was simply waiting elsewhere. Emma parked in front of a nondescript administrative building. Before we got out, she turned to me. "Remember what we talked about. You have options. Don't let them intimidate you into accepting anything less than you deserve." We'd spent most of yesterday discussing possible outcomes. Discharge, honorable, general, or other than honorable. Demotion, transfer. Each carried its own consequences for my future. Captain Cole was waiting outside his office, his posture military straight but his expression concerned. He nodded at Emma, then addressed me formally. "Staff Sergeant Brooks, thank you for reporting as requested." I automatically stood at attention. "Sir, at ease," he said, then glanced at his watch. "We have 20 minutes before our meeting with General Langston and Colonel Weber. Let's use them wisely." Inside his office, Captain Cole closed the door and gestured for us to sit. The formality dropped from his demeanor. "Brooks, I need to be clear, this isn't going to be easy. General Langston is furious. He sees your actions as a direct challenge to his authority, which, let's face it, they were." I nodded, accepting this reality. "But," Cole continued, "there are mitigating factors. Your spotless record. Your years of exemplary service, the unusual demands placed on you." "Unusual demands?" Emma interjected. "Is that what you call exploitation?" Cole studied her for a moment. "You must be Emma. Brooks has mentioned you." He turned back to me. "Your sister isn't wrong. The way you've been utilized falls outside normal protocols. I've documented this." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were printouts of duty rosters, event schedules, and personnel assignments spanning the last 3 years. Each document highlighted patterns, my name appearing far more frequently than others, my hours consistently exceeding regulations, requests for leave repeatedly denied when others were approved. "You've been building a case," I said, surprised. "Not just for you," Cole replied. "This is happening across departments. Good soldiers being held back because they're too competent in their current roles. It's creating burnout and resentment. Your situation is just the most egregious example I've found. So what's the plan? Emma asked, sounding slightly less hostile. Brooks acknowledges her actions were inappropriate, Cole explained. But we counter that they were the result of systematic overwork and inequitable treatment. We're not asking for no consequences, that's unrealistic. We're asking for proportional consequences that acknowledge the circumstances. It was a sound strategy, but doubt lingered. Will General Langston even listen? Probably not, Cole admitted. But Colonel Weber might. And she outranks me, which means she can influence Langston. She's fair, and she's been watching this pattern herself. A knock at the door interrupted us. A young specialist, not Rodriguez, I noted with a pang, stood at attention. Sir, General Langston and Colonel Weber are ready in conference room A. Cole nodded. We'll be right there. He turned back to us after the specialist left. Ready? I smoothed my uniform, which felt strangely foreign after just a few days in civilian clothes. As I'll ever be, Emma squeezed my hand. I'll wait here. Actually, Cole said, if Brooks has no objection, I'd like you to join us. Having family present can sometimes humanize the proceedings. The conference room was austere, a long table, uncomfortable chairs, fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. General Langston sat at the head, his face impassive. Beside him was Colonel Weber, a stern-faced woman in her 50s whom I'd encountered only a few times during my service. Across from them were 2 empty chairs for Captain Cole and me, and a third that Emma took, sitting slightly behind us. Staff Sergeant Brooks. General Langston began without preamble. Do you understand why you're here? Yes, sir, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Please enlighten us then. I took a deep breath. I abandoned my post, sir. I failed to fulfill my assigned duties and left the base without authorization. And why did you do this? Colonel Weber asked, her tone neutral. I hesitated, looking at Captain Cole, who nodded encouragingly. I was overwhelmed, ma'am. The constant demands, the lack of support, the denial of leave even for family emergencies. I reached a breaking point. General Langston's expression hardened. The military isn't a civilian job, Brooks. We don't get to walk out when things get tough. With all due respect, sir, Captain Cole interjected. Staff Sergeant Brooks didn't walk out because things got tough. She walked out after years of being assigned duties beyond her normal scope, denied rotations that would have advanced her career, and refused standard leave that was granted to her peers. He opened the folder, presenting the documentation we'd reviewed earlier. These records show a clear pattern of disparate treatment, Cole continued. While other personnel in culinary operations averaged 50, 60-hour weeks, Brooks consistently worked 70 to 80 hours. While others were rotated to new assignments every 18 to 24 months, Brooks remained in the same position for over 5 years, despite exemplary performance reviews that recommended advancement. Colonel Weber picked up one of the documents, studying it with a frown. And this leave request? For a family funeral? Denied, ma'am, I confirmed. My father's funeral. Weber's frown deepened. On what grounds? Operational necessity, General Langston answered before I could. We had the Secretary of Defense visiting. And no other qualified personnel could cover a meal service? Weber asked, her tone sharpening. Brooks is our most experienced. That's exactly the problem, isn't it? Weber interrupted. Staff Sergeant Brooks became indispensable, and instead of being rewarded for that excellence, she was penalized with increased workload and decreased opportunity. The silence that followed Colonel Weber's statement stretched uncomfortably. General Langston's face had turned an alarming shade of red, while Colonel Weber maintained her composed, analytical expression. This isn't a civilian workplace discrimination hearing, Langston finally said, his voice tight with controlled anger. This is the United States Army. We operate based on orders and discipline, not personal feelings. Indeed, Colonel Weber replied coolly. And according to Army Regulation 620, commanders are responsible for maintaining reasonable workload distribution and ensuring equitable treatment of all personnel under their command. She tapped the documents in front of her. These records suggest a significant deviation from that standard. I sat perfectly still, hardly daring to breathe. Never in my 11 years of service had I witnessed a superior officer so directly challenge a general. Captain Cole looked equally stunned, though he recovered quickly. General Colonel, he said, I believe we all want the same thing here, to maintain the integrity of the chain of command while addressing legitimate concerns about personnel management. Staff Sergeant Brooks made a serious error in judgment, but her previous record of service warrants consideration. General Langston's jaw worked as if he were chewing something unpleasant. What exactly are you proposing, Captain? A general discharge under honorable conditions, Cole replied promptly. Staff Sergeant Brooks accepts responsibility for her actions and acknowledges the breach of protocol, but the circumstances warrant leniency. Absolutely not, Langston snapped. That would send a message that walking away from duty is acceptable if you're feeling overworked. I'm recommending an other than honorable discharge. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. An other than honorable discharge would follow me forever, affecting everything from future employment to VA benefits. It would be as if my 11 years of service meant nothing. Emma shifted forward in her seat. Excuse me, General, she said, her voice surprisingly steady despite the tension in the room. Langston glared at her. This isn't a public forum, Ms. Brooks. No, it's not, Emma agreed. It's a proceeding that will determine my sister's future, based on one mistake after 11 years of exemplary service. Service that included missing our father's funeral because she was told her duty to prepare a dinner was more important than her duty to her family. Emma? I whispered, trying to silence her, but she continued. My sister has never complained. She's never demanded recognition or special treatment. She just kept working harder and longer because that's who she is. And how was she rewarded? With more work, more pressure, less support. Colonel Weber was watching Emma with interest, while Langston looked increasingly uncomfortable. Ms. Brooks makes a valid point, Weber said. Staff Sergeant Brooks's file indicates she's received 3 commendations for exceptional service, yet remained at the same rank and duty station for an unusually long period. The Culinary Operations Department has been understaffed, Langston countered. We couldn't afford to lose our most experienced personnel. Then perhaps, Weber suggested, the solution would have been to address the staffing shortages rather than overburden the staff you had. The back and forth continued for nearly an hour. Captain Cole presented more evidence of the systemic issues affecting not just me, but several other service members. Colonel Weber asked pointed questions about leave policies and rotation schedules. General Langston defended his decisions while gradually shifting from outright hostility to grudging acknowledgement of possible oversights in personnel management. Throughout, I remained largely silent, speaking only when directly addressed. This wasn't just about me anymore. It had become something larger, a reckoning with a culture that confused dedication with exploitation. Finally, Colonel Weber straightened the papers in front of her and looked directly at me. Staff Sergeant Brooks, do you wish to continue your military career? The question caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on defending my actions that I hadn't considered what I actually wanted. I'm not sure, ma'am, I answered honestly. I believe in service, in duty. But I also believe in dignity and fairness. Weber nodded, as if my answer confirmed something for her. General Langston, Captain Cole, I'd like to speak with Staff Sergeant Brooks privately. Would you excuse us for a moment? Langston looked like he wanted to object, but thought better of it. He and Cole left the room, leaving me with Colonel Weber and Emma. Once the door closed, Weber's formal demeanor softened slightly. Off the record, Brooks, that took courage. Not the walking out part. That was impulsive and ill-advised. But coming back to face the consequences? That's the mark of a true soldier. Thank you, ma'am, I said, uncertain where this was going. I've been watching the Culinary Operations Department for some time, she continued. The turnover rate is concerning. The burnout rate, even more so. Your situation isn't unique, just more extreme. She tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the table. I'm going to propose a compromise. A general discharge under honorable conditions, as Captain Cole suggested, if you want to leave the service. Or, if you wish to continue your career, a transfer to Fort Benning with a promotion to Sergeant First Class. I stared at her, stunned. A promotion? After what I did? After 11 years of exemplary service that was inadequately recognized, Weber corrected. The incident will remain in your file as a formal reprimand, but it will be balanced against documentation of the circumstances that led to it. She leaned forward. The Army isn't perfect, Brooks. Like any institution, it sometimes fails its people. But that doesn't mean we can't try to fix what's broken. Emma touched my arm. What do you want, Naomi? Not what you think you should do. What do you want? For the first time in years, I allowed myself to truly consider the question. Did I want to leave the military behind? Start fresh in civilian life? Or did I want to continue serving but under different conditions? I thought about the pride I'd felt when I first enlisted, the satisfaction of a job well done, the camaraderie of serving alongside others dedicated to something larger than themselves. I want to stay, I said finally. But I want things to be different, Colonel Weber nodded. They will be, at least at Fort Benning, under my command. I can't promise perfection, but I can promise fairness. She stood, signaling the end of our private conversation. I'll inform General Langston of my recommendation. As the investigating officer assigned to this case, my assessment carries significant weight, but the final decision will require his concurrence. As she moved toward the door, she paused. Oh, and Brooks? If you accept the transfer, I'd like you to develop a training program for new culinary operations personnel. Something that emphasizes both technical excellence and sustainable work practices. I blinked. A training program, ma'am? Yes. Based on your experience, both what to do and what not to do. Sometimes the best teachers are those who've learned the hard way. With that, she opened the door and called General Langston and Captain Cole back in. The next 30 minutes were tense but productive. Colonel Weber presented her recommendation with such compelling logic that even Langston found it difficult to object, especially when she pointedly mentioned that this matter could warrant a broader investigation into personnel management practices across the base. The threat was subtle but clear. Push too hard against me, and the scrutiny might extend to his entire command. By the end of the meeting, it was settled. I would receive a formal reprimand for unauthorized absence, but it would be accompanied by a transfer to Fort Benning and a promotion to Sergeant First Class. I would also be granted immediate leave 2 weeks to transition and prepare for my new assignment. As we left the conference room, Captain Cole shook my hand. Congratulations, Sergeant First Class Brooks. Not exactly how most people get promoted, but I can't say it wasn't deserved. Thank you, sir, I said, still processing everything that had happened. For everything, he shrugged. Don't thank me too much. I'm being transferred too. Apparently, advocating for one's subordinates is considered disruptive in some circles. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely distressed that his career might suffer for helping me. Cole smiled. Don't be. I requested it. After seeing what happened here, I realized I needed a change too. Sometimes walking away, or in our case, transferring, is the right choice. As Emma and I headed back to her car, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. I had faced the consequences of my actions and emerged not just intact, but with a path forward. A path with greater recognition, responsibility, and respect. So, Emma said as we drove away from the base, 2 weeks of freedom before you start your new life. What do you want to do first? I looked out the window at Fort Falcon receding in the distance. Sleep, I said with a small laugh. For about 3 days straight. And then cook something just for us. Something that nobody ordered or demanded. Something just because it brings joy, Emma smiled. That sounds perfect. 3 days into my leave, I woke up before dawn, not from habit or anxiety, but from genuine restfulness. For the first time in years, I felt rested, my mind clear and calm. Emma's guest room had become a sanctuary, free from the constant pressure of the next meal service, the next inspection, the next impossible demand. I padded quietly to the kitchen, careful not to wake Emma or disturb Bandit, who had taken to sleeping curled against my door as if standing guard. The morning light was just beginning to filter through the windows, painting the kitchen in soft gold. On a whim, I opened Emma's refrigerator and pantry, taking inventory. She wasn't much of a cook. Her busy teaching schedule meant lots of takeout and simple meals, but she had the basics. Eggs, butter, flour, milk. Fresh berries that looked like a rare indulgence. Coffee beans in the freezer. A plan formed in my mind. Not a duty roster or a production schedule, but something far more personal. Breakfast. Not for 40 demanding officers, but for my sister who had given me shelter and support when I needed it most. I moved through the kitchen with practiced efficiency, but the feeling was entirely different. Each movement was a choice, not an obligation. Each ingredient selected with care, not dictated by a requisition form. I found myself humming as I worked, something I hadn't done in the kitchen for years. By the time Emma stumbled in, drawn by the aroma of coffee and baking, I had prepared a feast: blueberry pancakes, crispy bacon, scrambled eggs with herbs from her neglected windowsill garden, and fresh squeezed orange juice. What's all this? She asked, staring at the spread. Breakfast, I said simply. Not because I have to. Because I want to. Emma's eyes welled up unexpectedly. Do you know how long it's been since someone cooked for me? Like, really cooked, not just heated something up? We sat together enjoying the meal in the morning quiet. There was a piece to it that I hadn't experienced in cooking for a long time, the simple pleasure of nourishing someone you care about. So, Emma said, polishing off her second pancake, what's on the agenda for your vacation? I sipped my coffee, considering. I think I'd like to visit Dad's grave. I never got to say goodbye properly. Emma nodded. We can go tomorrow. It's about an hour's drive. And then, I continued, I want to cook. Not for work. Not for duty, just for joy, for creativity. I've forgotten what that feels like. You can take over my kitchen anytime, Emma offered. God knows I barely use it. Over the next few days, a pattern emerged. Mornings were for simple pleasures. Coffee on the porch, walks with Bandit, catching up on books I'd meant to read for years. Afternoons were for cooking experimental, playful cooking without deadlines or demands. I made dishes I'd never had time to try, complex French pastries, slow-cooked Italian ragouts, delicate Japanese confections. Some were successful, others hilariously not, but all were freeing. Emma's neighbors became willing taste testers, appearing at the door with increasing frequency as word spread about the chef on vacation, producing wonders in apartment 3B. One evening, as we shared a particularly successful Caco van with Mrs. Delaney from next door and her teenage son, my phone rang. It was Captain Cole. Brooks, he said when I answered. How's civilian life treating you? Technically, I'm still military, I reminded him. Just on leave. Right, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. Listen, I wanted to let you know there have been some changes at Fort Falcon since you left. What kind of changes? I asked, moving to Emma's porch for privacy. General Langston has initiated a review of personnel assignments across all departments, Cole explained. Apparently, Colonel Weber's concerns about systemic inequities in duty distribution made it up the chain of command. There's talk of implementing new protocols for leave requests and rotation schedules. I sat down hard on Emma's porch swing. Are you serious? Completely. And there's more. Remember Specialist Rodriguez? My heart sank. In all the chaos, I hadn't given enough thought to how my actions might have affected the young cook who had worked under me. Is he okay? Better than okay, Cole assured me. He's been promoted to your old position with adequate staffing support, I might add. He asked me to tell you that he's using your recipes and that everyone says the food has never been better. A complicated mix of emotions washed over me. Pride in Rodriguez. Relief that he was doing well, a strange pang of something like loss. That's good to hear, I managed. He also said to tell you that he's not working solo like you did. Apparently, he was quite vocal about needing a proper team. Cited your situation as an example of what not to do. I laughed, genuinely delighted by this. Good for him. After I hung up, I rejoined Emma and her neighbors, my mind still processing what Cole had told me. My small act of rebellion walking away when I'd reached my breaking point had somehow catalyzed changes I'd never imagined possible. Everything okay? Emma asked, noting my expression. Yeah, I said, smiling. Everything's great, actually. That night, unable to sleep despite my newfound restfulness, I sat at Emma's small desk and began to write. Not a formal report or a duty roster, but a curriculum. A training program for culinary personnel, just as Colonel Weber had suggested. I wrote about technical skills, of course knife techniques, flavor profiles, mass production without sacrificing quality. But I also wrote about sustainability, about setting boundaries, about the difference between service and servitude, about finding joy in the work even when it's demanding. By dawn, I had the framework for something I was genuinely proud of, a program that would not only train excellent military cooks, but would help them remain excellent without burning out. As the end of my leave approached, I found myself surprisingly eager to begin my new assignment. Fort Benning represented not just a promotion or a fresh start, but a chance to implement real change to ensure that what happened to me wouldn't happen to others. The day before I was scheduled to report for duty, Emma threw an impromptu goodbye party. Aunt Celia came bearing her famous peach cobbler. So did the neighbors who had become my culinary guinea pigs, each bringing something to share. Even Rodriguez made the drive from Fort Falcon, arriving with a cheesecake he'd made using my recipe. The general asked about you, he told me as we stood in Emma's kitchen, away from the main gathering. Not in a bad way. He seemed, I don't know, reflective. He said something about how sometimes the system fails good soldiers. I raised an eyebrow. General Langston said that? Rodriguez nodded. People are talking, about what happened. About why you left. It's making some of the higher-ups uncomfortable, but in a good way. Like they're being forced to look at things differently. As the party wound down and guests began to leave, each offering good wishes for my new position, I found myself alone with Emma on the porch swing. Bandit lay at our feet, occasionally thumping his tail against the wooden boards. I'm going to miss you, Emma said, leaning her head on my shoulder. It's been nice having you here. I'm going to miss you too, I replied. But Fort Benning isn't that far. I'll visit often. And you can come see me too. I will, she promised. And next time you feel like the world is crushing you, call me before you run away to an airport, okay? I laughed. Deal. As we sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the twilight sky, I reflected on the strange journey of the past few weeks. From desperation to defiance to something that felt remarkably like peace. I had always believed that duty meant sacrifice, giving up pieces of yourself for the greater good. But perhaps true duty, true service, required being whole enough to give your best, not just your all. Tomorrow, I would put on my uniform again. I would report for duty at Fort Benning. I would begin building something new, a training program, yes, but also a new understanding of what it meant to be both a soldier and a human being. For now, though, I was content to sit with my sister, listening to the night sounds of her neighborhood, feeling the weight of Bandit against my feet, and knowing that sometimes walking away is the first step toward finding your way back to yourself. Fort Benning greeted me with unexpected warmth. Unlike the stark functionality of Fort Falcon's culinary facilities, the Benning kitchens were newly renovated, with state-of-the-art equipment and ample space. My new quarters were similarly upgraded, a small but private apartment on base, rather than the shared barracks I'd become accustomed to. But the most striking difference was Colonel Weber's leadership style. On my first day, she personally introduced me to my new Team 6 culinary specialists of varying ranks and experience levels, all looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and respect. Sergeant First Class Brooks comes to us with exceptional experience and innovative ideas for our culinary operations, Weber told them. She'll be developing and implementing a new training program while overseeing special events catering. I expect you all to provide your full support. After the introductions, Weber took me on a tour of the facilities, explaining her vision for the department. We feed soldiers, Brooks. That's a responsibility, not just a task. But the people doing the feeding are soldiers, too. And they deserve the same respect we give everyone who serves. I couldn't agree more, ma'am, I replied, still slightly disoriented by the radical change in command philosophy. Good, Weber nodded. Because I'm giving you considerable latitude to reshape how we approach culinary training here. The curriculum outline you sent ahead is impressive. I want to see it implemented within 6 months. 6 months. A timeline that was ambitious but not impossible. A challenge rather than a burden. I felt a spark of excitement that had been absent from my work for years. I'll need to adjust some of the duty rotations, I said, already mentally restructuring the schedules I'd seen. Everyone should experience all aspects of the operation, not just get pigeonholed in one station. Do what you need to do, Weber replied. Just keep me informed. That first week tested everything I thought I knew about military kitchen operations. Without the crushing pressure I'd grown accustomed to, I found myself second-guessing my instincts. Was I pushing hard enough? Was I pushing too hard? How do you maintain standards without creating the very conditions I'd fled? My new second-in-command, Sergeant Liu, noticed my hesitation during a particularly busy lunch service. Permission to speak freely, Sergeant First Class? She asked as we worked side by side plating meals for a visiting congressional delegation. Always, I replied, genuinely meaning it. You're walking on eggshells, she said bluntly. We're not going to break if you give clear orders. I paused, a serving spoon halfway to a plate. I'm trying to find the right balance, Liu nodded. Respect doesn't mean hesitation. It means clarity. We can't follow a leader who's afraid to lead. Her words hit home. I'd been so concerned about not becoming General Langston that I'd forgotten how to be Sergeant Brooks. You're right, I acknowledged. Let's reset. Station check in 5 minutes. Full team briefing at 1400 hours, Liu smiled. Yes, Sergeant First Class. The afternoon briefing became a turning point. Instead of simply issuing orders, I outlined my vision for the department, a place where excellence and well-being coexisted, where creativity was encouraged alongside precision, where every member felt valued for their contributions. "We're going to work hard," I told them. "I won't pretend otherwise, but we're going to work smart. We're going to support each other. And we're going to take pride in what we do, not just because it's our duty, but because it matters." Over the following weeks, the team began to coalesce around this vision. We established new protocols for meal preparation that distributed workload more evenly. We implemented a rotation system that ensured everyone developed a full range of skills. We created a feedback mechanism that allowed ideas to flow up as well as orders to flow down, and we cooked. Not just the standard fare expected of military kitchens, but food prepared with intention and care. Nutritious meals that fueled training. Comfort foods that eased homesickness. Special event menus that rivaled civilian catering companies. 3 months into my new position, Colonel Weber invited me to her office for a performance review. "The changes you've implemented are showing results," she said, reviewing the reports in front of her. "Meal satisfaction ratings are up 27%. Staff retention has improved. And I've received requests from 3 other departments asking how they might apply similar principles to their operations." "Thank you, ma'am," I said, feeling a flush of pride. "The team has embraced the new approach wholeheartedly." Weber looked up from her papers. "And you, Brooks? How are you finding the transition?" I considered the question carefully. "Challenging," I admitted, "but in a good way. I'm learning that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating conditions where everyone can contribute their best." She nodded approvingly. "That's a lesson some officers never learn, even after decades of service." She closed the file on her desk. "I have a new assignment for you. The commanding general is hosting an international delegation next month. I want your team to handle the formal dinner." My stomach tightened instinctively. The old fear impossible demands, inadequate resources, thankless labor rose like a ghost. Weber must have seen it in my face. "This isn't Fort Falcon, Brooks. You'll have whatever personnel and resources you need, and you'll receive full credit for your work." The difference was stark. Not just in the words, but in the intent behind them. This wasn't an order to be obeyed regardless of cost. It was an opportunity being offered with appropriate support. "We'll deliver excellence, ma'am," I assured her, the fear receding as quickly as it had appeared. As I walked back to the kitchens, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Just got my spring break schedule. Coming to visit you next month. How's the new job treating you?" I stopped in the bright Georgia sunshine to reply, "Better than I could have imagined. I'm cooking again, really cooking. Can't wait to show you." That evening, as I worked late developing the international delegation menu, Sergeant Liu brought me a cup of coffee and lingered by my desk. "Some of us are going into Columbus for dinner tomorrow," she said casually. "Good Thai place. You should come." I looked up, surprised. At Fort Falcon, the line between leadership and subordinates had been rigidly maintained, another barrier to genuine connection. Here, apparently, communal meals off base were normal. "I'd like that," I said. Liu smiled. "Good. You work too much," says the woman bringing me coffee at 2,000 hours, I pointed out. She shrugged. "Different. I'm finishing my shift." "You're starting a second one." She wasn't wrong. Old habits died hard, and I still sometimes caught myself taking on more than necessary, stepping in when I should step back. "I'll try to wrap this up soon," I promised. After she left, I looked around the empty kitchen, clean, organized, peaceful. So different from the chaotic pressure cooker I'd fled. The knot of anxiety that had lived between my shoulder blades for years had loosened, though it hadn't disappeared entirely. Perhaps it never would. Some scars fade but never vanish completely. But here, in this new place with this new team, I was finding my way back to what had drawn me to culinary arts in the first place, the satisfaction of creating something that nourished both body and spirit. The joy of sharing skills and watching others grow. The pride of service freely given, not extracted. As I finalized the menu for the international delegation, a thoughtfully curated selection showcasing American regional cuisines with subtle nods to the visiting countries, I realized I was smiling. Not the tight professional smile I'd worn like armor at Fort Falcon, but something genuine and unguarded. This, I thought, is what healing feels like. 6 months to the day after my arrival at Fort Benning, I stood in the newly designated culinary training center, watching as the first class of students navigated the practical exam I'd designed. 20 soldiers moved efficiently through their stations, preparing a multi-course meal under the watchful eyes of my instructional team. Colonel Weber stood beside me, observing with approval. "Your curriculum is being adopted at 3 other bases," she informed me. "The Army Quartermaster School has requested your input on their advanced culinary program revisions." Pride swelled in my chest. "That's unexpected," Weber smiled slightly. "Is it? You transformed a breakdown into a breakthrough, Brooks. That's rare." The training program had evolved beyond my initial vision. What began as technical instruction had expanded to include modules on team management, resource allocation, stress mitigation, and leadership principles. We weren't just training cooks. We were developing culinary leaders who understood both the craft and the human elements of food service. "The general's office called," Weber continued. "They want to discuss expanding the program Army-wide." I turned to her, startled. "Which general?" "Williamson, Pentagon, not Langston then." I hadn't heard his name in months, though occasionally I wondered what had become of Fort Falcon's commanding officer after the changes my departure had sparked. As if reading my thoughts, Weber added, "General Langston has been reassigned to a strategic planning role in Washington. Less direct personnel management?" I nodded, unsurprised. The military had ways of handling leadership, whose methods came under scrutiny, not punishment exactly, but repositioning to minimize further issues. "Speaking of Washington," Weber said, "that's where you're headed next week. The presentation to Army leadership about the program. Your travel orders came through this morning, Washington. A presentation to Army brass. 6 months ago, the thought would have terrified me. Now it felt like a natural progression, challenging but manageable. I'll be ready," I assured her. Later that evening, as I packed for a weekend visit to Emma's our monthly tradition, now my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I hadn't seen in months. Captain Cole. "Brooks." He greeted me warmly when I answered. Or should I say Sergeant First Class Brooks, Army culinary innovator? I laughed. "Just Brooks is fine. How are you, Captain?" "Colonel, actually," he corrected. "Recent promotion?" "I'm at Fort Sill now, overseeing training operations." "Congratulations," I said sincerely. "You deserve it, as do you. I've heard about your program. It's making waves in all the right places." We caught up briefly, his new position, my upcoming Washington trip, mutual acquaintances from Fort Falcon. Then his tone turned more serious. "I ran into Rodriguez last month at a regional conference. He's doing well, been promoted again. But he told me something interesting. Said General Langston personally apologized to him for the structural oversights in culinary operations." I nearly dropped the phone. "Langston apologized?" "Apparently. Not effusively, mind you, military style, failures of command responsibility, and so forth. But still, it's something." After we hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed, processing this unexpected development. General Langston rigid, unyielding Langston acknowledging fault, however obliquely. The world truly was full of surprises. The trip to Washington the following week brought another surprise. As I presented the culinary training program to a room full of senior officers and policy directors, I noticed a familiar face in the back row. General Langston, watching intently as I outlined the program's principles and preliminary results. He didn't approach me afterward, but he did nod once, a gesture so subtle I might have imagined it. Recognition, perhaps? Or possibly respect. I didn't need either from him anymore. My validation came from elsewhere now, from the success of my students, from Colonel Weber's continued support, from the knowledge that I had transformed a moment of crisis into meaningful change. The following month marked 1 year since that early morning at the Colorado Springs airport. 1 year since I'd chosen self-preservation over self-sacrifice. 1 year of rebuilding, not just a career, but a life worth living. To mark the occasion, I hosted a dinner at my Fort Benning apartment. Emma came, of course, bringing Aunt Celia and Bandit, who had become as much my dog as hers during my frequent visits. Captain now Colonel Cole made the trip from Oklahoma. Rodriguez drove down from Fort Falcon. My team from Benning arrived bearing wine and desserts. As we gathered around the table I'd set with care, enjoying a meal prepared not from obligation but from love, I found myself overwhelmed with gratitude. For second chances? For hard lessons learned. For the courage to walk away and the strength to begin again. "A toast," Emma suggested, raising her glass. To my sister, who taught the army how to make a proper soufflé and how to treat its people properly, too. Laughter and clinking glasses filled the room. In that moment, surrounded by the family I was born to and the family I had chosen, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: wholeness. Later, as the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Rodriguez lingered to help with cleanup. You know, he said as we loaded the dishwasher. When you left that morning, we were all in shock. No one could believe Brooks' reliable, perfect Brooks would just disappear. I winced at the memory. Not my finest moment. Maybe not, he agreed. But it was necessary. Things are different now, not just for you, but for all of us. The kitchen at Falcon has proper staffing. Reasonable hours. Actual weekends off sometimes. He shook his head in wonder. All because you reached your breaking point. I hope it didn't have to come to that, I said quietly. But I'm glad something good came from it. After everyone had gone and my apartment was quiet again, I stepped onto my small balcony. The night was clear, stars spreading across the Georgia sky like scattered salt. In the distance, I could hear the faint sounds of the bass of bugle playing taps, the occasional vehicle on patrol, the rhythmic cadence of late-night runners. The military remained a part of me, as it always would. But now it was a relationship built on mutual respect rather than blind obedience. I had learned that true service required boundaries, that leadership meant lifting others rather than leaning on them, that saying no sometimes made the yes more meaningful. In 3 days, I would fly to Fort Lee to help implement the culinary program there. The week after, I had meetings scheduled with quartermaster school officials. The work continued, expanding beyond what I'd initially imagined, touching more lives than I'd thought possible. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I allowed myself to fully acknowledge the journey. From that desperate pre-dawn flight to this peaceful evening, from breaking point to breakthrough, I had entered the military believing that strength meant enduring without complaint, serving without question, giving without limit. I now understood that true strength included knowing your worth, establishing healthy boundaries, and sometimes walking away to find a better way forward. The general had handed me a list of 40 officers and expected unquestioning obedience. In choosing myself instead, I had found not just escape, but purpose. Not just rebellion, but reformation. As I turned to go inside, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Proud of you, sis. Not just for what you've accomplished, but for who you've become. I smiled in the darkness. The old me would have deflected the praise, uncomfortable with recognition. The new me simply embraced it, responding, "Thank you. I'm proud too," and I was. Not with arrogance or self-importance, but with the quiet dignity of someone who had faced her breaking point and emerged stronger, wiser, and more whole. Someone who had learned that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away, not in defeat, but in determination to find a better path. I had said yes, sir, that night in Fort Falcon's kitchen, but my heart had said no more. In listening to that inner voice, I had found not just my limits but my power. In leaving, I had found my way back to myself, and that, perhaps, was the greatest victory of all.